Welcome back to Good Morning Sri Lanka, and more tips and more videos and more news from all over the world is going to be coming out of RTV on MTV Sports right now, so stay tuned for that. During the next couple of minutes I will be giving you more tips and a few pointers, especially if you want to be talking about Facebook, and which we did in the last couple of minutes before the show. Okay, so we were talking about Facebook in general and social media sites, and a few more cons of allowing Facebook and going Facebook out of hand. Could be regarded as the main concern for organizations is not social working sites as per se, but the people using them, because social workers are the weakest link, and their actions can create problems and issues for a lot of people. I mean, computer users' actions are often based on impulse, they say, and not genuine awareness of what they are doing exactly. And of course, when it comes to viruses and stuff like that, it is also one of those huge cons and disadvantages, and a huge threat, because the threat from web-borne viruses and malware is often overlooked by a lot of businesses, and hackers are attracted to sites such as Facebook and Twitter for that matter. Okay, so here are a few pointers that I would like to give, a few recommendations of what you should be using if you got Facebook allowed in your offices and perhaps at homes as well. So this can these advices can come in handy. Educate and train your staff members about security issues, and most employees are not aware of the time they spend on Facebook. Okay, and because of their actions online can cause security actions based on this article. So tell them in a language they understand on how a simple click on a link, okay, on any of those applications can download so much of viruses and then can absolutely destroy your C drive for that matter. So you have to be extremely careful and train your staff, give them intensive training, and give them maybe grant them a few tips on exactly what they should be doing. Okay, so monitoring of all web activity is important, and employees should be aware that their actions are being recorded, so that the employees are obviously not going to misuse any of those free time that the management would like to offer to them, especially the time period that they would like to allocate online. And the failure to adhere to company policy can result in disciplinary action and or even dismissal. So those are not bad advice. I mean, these are a few pointers that you could always put up on a on a board, on a notice board, especially when the staff can come in, so they can just read those and get a positive vibe and positive idea of what they should be doing if they are allowed to go on Facebook, and not to make any comment which could arouse a lot of negative thoughts. So moving on to another video, if you are in India, perhaps this is one of those news that we have we've shared information like this on Gmsl before as well, because a lot of Indian traditional farmers tend to focus on traditional crops to cultivation, okay, on a lot of other stuff, but this particular news item is going to be recommending or asking to shift their focus from traditional crops to cultivation of lily flower, as surging the sales of flowers yield profits for growers. So India and lily, this is one of those interesting news as well. Check it out and we'll be right back. The floriculture department in Shapi area on the outskirts of Nainital town in India's northern Uttarakhand state encourages the farmers to shift their focus from traditional crops to cultivation of lily flower, as surge in the sales of flowers yield profits for the growers. Traditional crops are increasingly giving away to lily and farming in the villages because of the rich dividends the flower offers to the farmers. Lily flowers have picked up in the area, and farmers, unlike earlier times, are less stressful about marketing their farm produce. According to farmers, they are earning a good amount of money from lily and flower, which is a low-cost affair and is also profitable.
3 साल से हम इसकी व्यावसायिक खेती को प्रोत्साहन कर रहे हैं.
We have been encouraging the cultivation of lilies since 3 years, but along with that, we've also started preparing the seeds of lilian. This was one of the main objectives behind the project, other than substituting the imports of seeds with its production in our country, and we have achieved humongous success in the same.
इसकी मोटाई और पत्तों में आप देख रहे हो
Farmers are earning about 70,000 to 80,000 rupees per month out of Lillian cultivation, whereas they used to get 5,000 rupees from the traditional crops. Lillian is a fast-growing flower and takes only 3 months to grow, depending on production practices and weather conditions. Farmers said that the flowers are in huge demand as many florists are ready to pay good prices. A grower, Sudhir Shada, said that due to high demands in foreign countries, efforts are being made to produce good quality lilies and help them export in the international market.
हमारे आशा बहुत है क्योंकि विदेशों में इसकी मांग बहुत ज़्यादा।
Our hopes are very high because the flower has very high demand in foreign countries. Until now, we were not able to take orders from foreign clients because of the inability to grow high quality flowers in large numbers. But now, with the help of more local farmers, like some who are already enrolled with us, have started similar projects on their fields. We will now provide them with a production plan, help them export their flowers.
करेंगे।
In the last 3 years, the cultivation of lilies have increased manifold and high profits have encouraged more farmers into this trade. Earlier, florists used to get flowers from the Himachal Pradesh, but due to the low quality flowers in Himachal, they are now approaching farms in Nainital. Alright, so positive vibe on that particular news. Moving on to useful tips that I'm about to give you in a business conversational etiquette. Especially when you're talking with your boss or your peers when it comes to work environment, these are some tips that I would like to share, especially when you disagree with something or you would like to raise your opinion, raise your voice and say, you know what, this is what I'm trying to say and you're wrong, and this is what my opinion stands and I think I'm right. So to say that sort of thing in a way that it does not, I repeat, it does not offend the other person is quite a difficult task, especially when you know that the other person is trying to prove something but you strongly feel that you are saying the right thing. So here we go. Tip number 1, good discussion results from people expressing different opinions. Here are some polite ways to disagree with another speaker, especially when you're disagreeing with someone. I'm afraid I have to disagree with you. That's number 1. Okay. Number 2 is, I understand your point but I believe that, and continue what you're saying. And number 3 is, I see what you're saying, but in my opinion, this is what I would do. Okay, so I'll repeat those 3 tips in the first tip itself. I'm afraid I have to disagree with you, because by saying the word I'm afraid, you're actually hinting that person that that person is also right, but here is something that I would like to point across and say, you know what, just listen to this as well, I've got something as well which you might consider as truthful. The second one is, I understand your point but I believe that my point is right as well. So very strange, but it's kind of true, you know, it's psychological effect. You feel like, you know, you're saying something and it's kind of true. It's a mutual understanding when it comes to that. Third one is in the first tip itself, the sub tip, I see what you're saying but in my opinion. So you give out an opinion, not disagreeing with your opponent, but giving your own opinion so that it does not overlay on each other, but giving tips so that person will understand you. So once again, it's mutual understanding and could actually prove to be healthy in making a decision. Okay. The second tip, it's not unusual for a conversation to get so exciting that people can't wait their turn to speak. I know how it is. A lot of people, especially in group discussions, people would love to raise their opinion. People would love to raise their voice and say, you know what, this is what I've gone in store. But it all comes down to your chance, your moment and your time to say, you know, raise your hand and say, this is what I want. Okay, so interrupting means a second person begins to speak before the first person is finished. That's a basic definition of interruption. So if someone interrupts you, you can allow them to speak, but then be firm about continuing with your own thoughts. And how to do that if someone interrupts you? Well, let me finish my point, or so, as I was saying. Okay, so if someone is trying to barge in, that's the right way of saying, barge into what you're saying in a very, very official meeting, and when you're talking to some, maybe your boss, saying a fact, you know what, this is what I should be doing, and the other person barges in and says something completely irrelevant or giving his own personal opinion on something, you can always say, well, let me finish my point, and then go ahead finishing your point. That is not rude, but that is being honest, and brutally honest. There's a thin line between those two, and I'm sure that you could set the record straight if there is any sort of irrelevance and if there's any sort of misunderstanding. Tip number 3, final tip that I'm going to give you right now, is sometimes the person doing the interrupting is you. Okay, so if you really feel the need to do this, at least begin with an apology. Don't be ashamed to say I'm sorry, because apologies are actually done by gentlemen and ladies for that matter. Okay, so you say I'm sorry to interrupt, or I'm sorry, but I can just say one thing. So if someone is saying something and you really feel, if you really get the urge to interrupt and say, you know what, my opinion really has to count right now, you can always barge in and say, I'm sorry to interrupt. Make sure that the apology comes in first, or just say, I'm sorry, but can I just say one thing? That always comes in handy for you. Okay? More tips I'm sure that I will give, and more music videos is coming up on the show itself on Good Morning Sri Lanka on today's episode. But before that, we're going to go into another quick video. This is about Israel marking their Memorial Day. Israel is entering one of its most emotionally charged weeks of the year. Okay, on Sunday the country held a Memorial Day ceremony and for the Israeli Defense Forces fallen soldiers at Jerusalem's Ammunition Hill, and this is what we've got in store for you on that news. Check it out. Israel has attended solemn ceremonies to mark the beginning of Memorial Day in the Jewish state. The holiday honors soldiers killed in battle and civilians killed in attacks against Israelis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in one ceremony that throughout history those who wished to annihilate the Jewish people failed, as will those who threaten to do so today.
We
don't want war. We're not bloodthirsty. Our hand is reached out in peace to all people and all states near and far. But throughout history, we've learned that only a strong defending force will ensure we are not harmed. According to the Israeli Foreign Ministry website, a total of 22,867 men, women and children have been killed since 1860, the year when Jews first ventured outside the walls of Jerusalem's old city to build new Jewish neighborhoods. The vast majority of the fallen are soldiers killed since Israel gained statehood in 1948. At a later ceremony near the Western Wall in Jerusalem's old city, participants paused as Israelis across the country observed a minute of silence. Israeli President Shimon Peres said during the ceremony, the Jewish state is as precious to us as the pain is deep. We will never forget and will always remember those to whom we owe Israel's existence and glory. Those who through the 65 years of the state protected it with their bodies, their blood, their spirit, defended its border, the safety of its citizens, its freedom and its independence. A series of memorial ceremonies took place in Israel during the day on the 15th of April, but at sundown Israel began to celebrate its Independence Day holiday. The two holidays coincide with one another every year. Well, that is it for that news, and of course more tips on disturbing a conference or interrupting for that matter is going to be pouring out. As I said before, I shall give you more tips, especially when it comes to business conferences, of course social media networking side, which was particularly the theme for today. So if you are a businessman, if you're working in an office where you have a professional standard, and if you're very official when it comes to meetings and getting stuff done, so I'm sure that today's episode is much helpful when it comes to those things. It's time for us to take a little commercial break, but do not go anywhere, because when we come back we are going to be sharing more thoughts and more tips plus more stories as well. Stay tuned.